fade in on darkness, the sound of distant waves, palm trees rustling in warm Hawaiian wind, then sirens. Blue and red lights illuminate a luxury bar in Hilo, Hawaii. March 28, 2022. Security camera footage shows confusion. Voices overlap. Someone is shouting. Someone is refusing to leave. Police body cam footage captures what happens next. An individual in designer clothing is asked to calm down. They don't. Bar staff look uncomfortable. Patrons are filming on phones. The situation is escalating. Officers move in. There's resistance. Then, handcuffs. This isn't just another celebrity meltdown captured on camera. This is something different. Because the person being arrested isn't just anyone. They're the face of a $300 million franchise. They're Warner Brothers' chosen savior for the DC extended universe. They're the actor hired to rescue a cinematic universe that's been hemorrhaging credibility for years. Their name is Ezra Miller, and at this exact moment, as handcuffs click shut on a Hawaiian sidewalk, they are 7 months away from the theatrical release of The Flash, one of the most expensive superhero films ever produced. Studio executives will wake up tomorrow to phone calls. Legal teams will be activated. Crisis management firms will be contacted. Insurance companies will review contracts. And somewhere in Burbank, California, someone will ask the question that's been whispered in Hollywood boardrooms for months. What do we do about Ezra? But here's the thing most people don't understand. This moment, this arrest in Hawaii, isn't the beginning of the story. It's not even the middle. By March 2022, the warning signs have been visible for years. The pattern has been established. The studio has already chosen silence over intervention. The machinery of fame has already failed. This moment is simply when the collapse becomes impossible to ignore. Because what's about to unfold over the next 16 months isn't a scandal. It's not a controversy. It's not even a fall from grace. It's a systematic implosion documented in real time across multiple states with law enforcement records, protective orders, and headlines that will make it nearly impossible for Warner Brothers to release their $250 million investment. And the most disturbing part? Almost none of it will come as a surprise. This is the story of how Hollywood built a star, ignored every warning sign, and then watched helplessly as everything fell apart. This is the story of Ezra Miller.
Before the arrests, before the allegations, before the crisis meetings, there was talent. Undeniable, unusual, impossible to ignore talent. Ezra Matthew Miller was born September 30th, 1992 in Wyckoff, New Jersey. Not Los Angeles, not New York City, a quiet suburb where most kids dream of escaping, not staying. From the beginning, Miller was different. They trained as an opera singer at the Metropolitan Opera. They were a musical prodigy before they were a teenager. They studied at the prestigious Hudson School, immersed in classical performance traditions most actors never encounter. When they entered acting, it wasn't through Disney Channel auditions or teen soap operas. It was through serious, deeply uncomfortable independent cinema. In 2011, at just 18 years old, Ezra Miller starred in We Need to Talk About Kevin, a psychological horror film about a school shooter, directed by Lynn Ramsey. The performance was chilling. Critics called it fearless. Tilda Swinton, their co-star, praised Miller's commitment and intensity. Hollywood noticed, but not in the usual way. Miller wasn't conventionally marketable. They were androgynous in their presentation, fluid in their identity, unapologetic in their strangeness. In an industry that typically rewards conformity, Miller represented something Hollywood claimed to want but rarely knew how to handle: genuine otherness. They appeared in The Perks of Being a Wallflower in 2012, playing Patrick, a gay high school student navigating identity and acceptance. The performance resonated with audiences who saw themselves reflected on screen, perhaps for the first time. Miller became a symbol for queer youth, for gender non-conforming artists, for anyone who felt like they didn't fit into traditional boxes. Fashion magazines put them on covers. They walked runways for major designers. They spoke eloquently about identity, art, and the limitations of binary thinking. And then came the call that would change everything. In 2014, Warner Brothers was assembling the DC Extended Universe, their answer to Marvel's billion-dollar dominance. They needed a Flash, not just an actor who could run fast, but someone who could embody youthful energy, intellectual curiosity, and emotional vulnerability. They chose Ezra Miller. It was, by all accounts, inspired casting. Miller brought gravitas to a character that could have been one-dimensional. They understood Barry Allen's isolation, his desperation for connection, his fundamental loneliness. When Justice League was released in 2017, despite the film's troubled production and mixed reception, Miller's performance was consistently praised. Critics and audiences agreed they had found their Flash. Warner Brothers agreed too. They greenlit a solo Flash film. They gave Miller a producer credit. They built an entire franchise around this one actor. The budget climbed, the stakes rose, the pressure mounted. And somewhere in the distance, barely visible, the first cracks began to appear. Because Hollywood has a pattern. It finds people who are different, who are brilliant, who are unpredictable. It celebrates that difference. It profits from that brilliance. And then, when the unpredictability becomes unmanageable, it acts surprised, as if they never saw it coming.
To understand what happened to Ezra Miller, you have to understand what was happening to DC. By 2017, Warner Brothers was in crisis. Marvel had built a meticulously planned cinematic universe generating billions in revenue. DC had churned out divisive films, director conflicts, and inconsistent world-building. Man of Steel polarized audiences. Batman v Superman underperformed. Suicide Squad was butchered in editing. Justice League became a cautionary tale, a film where the original director left after personal tragedy, a replacement director was brought in for extensive reshoots, and the final product satisfied almost no one. The studio had spent hundreds of millions building a universe that was collapsing in real time. They needed a win. They needed a film that could restore credibility. They needed the Flash. The concept was ambitious, a time travel narrative that could soft reboot the entire DCEU, bring back Michael Keaton's Batman, introduce a new Supergirl, reset continuity, fix past mistakes. It was narratively complex, emotionally weighty, and technically demanding, and it all depended on one actor carrying the entire film, Ezra Miller. Development began in 2014, but the project cycled through directors like a revolving door. Seth Grahame-Smith was hired, then departed. Rick Famuyiwa was hired, then departed. Robert Zemeckis was approached. He declined. Matthew Vaughn had conversations. Nothing materialized. Sam Raimi was considered. Didn't happen. The script was rewritten, then rewritten again, then again. Meanwhile, Miller remained attached. Warner Brothers had committed, not just to the character, but to this specific actor. Contracts were signed, deals were structured. Miller wasn't just the star, they had creative input, producer credits, influence over the direction of the film. The studio had made a calculated bet. They believed Miller's talent and cultural cachet outweighed any concerns about their unpredictability. They believed a solo Flash film could generate $1 billion globally. They believed they could control the narrative. In 2019, Andy Muschietti was finally hired to direct. The script stabilized, pre-production accelerated. The budget climbed to $220 million.
then higher. Production was scheduled for 2021. Then the pandemic hit. Delays compounded, schedules shifted. The release date was pushed from 2022 to 2023. And during those delays, during those months when production was on hold and the world was locked down, something started to go very wrong. Because Warner Brothers had built an entire franchise around one actor, an actor who was about to become unhireable. But the studio had already spent too much money to walk away. They were locked in. The gamble had been placed, and by the time they realized the bet was failing, it was already too late to pull out.
April 1st, 2020. A video surfaces on social media. The location is a bar in Reykjavik, Iceland. In the footage, Ezra Miller appears to grab a young woman by the throat, then throws her to the ground. The video is brief, chaotic. The audio is unclear, but the visual is undeniable. Within hours, the clip goes viral. Fans demand explanations. Media outlets pick up the story. Questions multiply. What happened? Was this assault? Were authorities contacted? Was anyone hurt? And most importantly, what will Warner Brothers do? The answer, it turns out, is nothing. Or more precisely, nothing publicly visible. No statement is released, no investigation is announced. Miller doesn't address it, the studio doesn't address it. Variety reaches out for comment, Deadline follows up, Entertainment Weekly investigates. Radio silence. And here's where the pattern begins, because in the absence of official information, the public creates its own narrative. Some defend Miller, claiming the video lacks context. Others express concern. Many simply move on, because without confirmation, without consequences, without official acknowledgement, the incident exists in a strange liminal space. It happened, it's documented, but officially it didn't happen at all. This is the first warning sign. Not the incident itself, though that's significant. The warning sign is the silence. The studio's calculated decision that non-response is the safest response. Because addressing it requires action. Action requires consequences. Consequences require difficult decisions about a $300 million investment. So the incident is absorbed, explained away privately, forgotten publicly. And Miller continues working. The Flash development continues, pre-production accelerates, costume fittings happen, stunt rehearsals proceed. The machine moves forward. But something has fundamentally shifted, because everyone now knows, Warner Brothers, the producers, Miller's representation, the insurance companies, that there is volatility here, that there is risk, and the choice has been made to proceed anyway. This is how Hollywood enables, not through malice, but through calculation, not through ignorance, but through willful blindness. Because stopping production means admitting the bet was wrong. It means losing money already spent. It means recasting, reshooting, rescheduling. It means weakness in a competitive industry where weakness is punished. So the warning sign is noted, filed away, and ignored. The Iceland incident becomes a footnote, something to manage, not address, something to contain, not investigate, and the precedent is set. When trouble emerges, the response is silence. When questions are asked, the strategy is deflection. When accountability is demanded, the answer is delay. This moment, this choice to do nothing, establishes the framework for everything that follows. Because Ezra Miller has just learned something crucial. There are no consequences. Not for them. Not yet. Not when a studio has already invested this much money. And that knowledge, that understanding of invulnerability, is perhaps the most dangerous thing of all.
Throughout 2021, as The Flash inches toward production, something shifts in Ezra Miller's public presence. The carefully curated image begins to fracture. Social media posts become erratic, cryptic messages appear and disappear. Photos surface, showing increasingly concerning behavior. Fan encounters are described online, some praising Miller's kindness,
others describing interactions that feel destabilizing, inappropriate, or simply strange. There are reports of Miller traveling extensively, seemingly without clear purpose. There are stories from film sets, not The Flash, but other projects, describing unprofessional conduct, missed calls, communication breakdowns. There are whispers in industry circles. Agents hear things. Publicists express private concerns. Managers try to intervene. But nothing is official. Nothing is on record. Nothing becomes a headline. Because Hollywood runs on controlled information. Press releases are strategic. Interviews are managed. Public appearances are choreographed. What's happening with Miller exists outside that controlled system. These are Instagram stories, not press conferences. These are Reddit threads, not Variety exclusives. These are secondhand accounts from people who encountered Miller at a bar, a party, a hotel lobby. People with no media access, no platform, no way to make their concerns heard beyond social media speculation. And social media speculation is easy to dismiss. It's easy to categorize as fan drama. It's easy to ignore. Meanwhile, production on The Flash officially begins in April 2021. Miller reports to set in London. They work with Andy Muschietti. They perform alongside Michael Keaton, Ben Affleck, Sasha Calle. The production is expensive, technically complex, and exhausting. And by all accounts, at least official accounts, Miller is professional. They hit their marks, they deliver the performance, they do the work. But offset, the pattern continues. There are reports of Miller exhibiting controlling behavior toward younger fans. There are descriptions of boundary violations, not criminal but concerning. Adults who meet Miller describe feeling manipulated. Parents express worry about their children's interactions with the actor. Online communities dedicated to Miller's work begin to fracture. Some fans remain fiercely loyal, defending every action. Others quietly step back, uncomfortable with what they're witnessing. The phrase parasocial relationship starts appearing in discussions about Miller, not describing fans' relationship with Miller, describing Miller's relationship with their own image. Because something seems to be happening, a blurring of identity between Ezra Miller, the person, and the Flash, the character, between the actor and the archetype, between the private individual and the public myth. Miller begins speaking in interviews about the responsibility of representation, about the weight of being a queer actor playing a superhero, about the pressure of carrying a franchise. The words are eloquent, intelligent, thoughtful, but people who interact with Miller off-camera describe someone increasingly disconnected from consensus reality, someone who seems to be constructing an alternate narrative, someone for whom fame hasn't brought clarity, but deepening confusion. And here's what makes this period so crucial. The chaos is escalating, but it's not yet catastrophic. The warning signs are multiplying, but they're not yet actionable. The instability is visible, but it's not undeniable. Warner Brothers is watching. Miller's team is intervening privately, but publicly the machine keeps running. The film keeps shooting. The release date stays locked. The marketing materials are being prepared. Because in Hollywood, momentum is everything, and stopping momentum, even when every instinct says you should, requires admitting you were wrong. That admission is still months away, but it's coming.
March 27th, 2022, 11:30 p.m. Margarita Village, a karaoke bar in Hilo, Hawaii. Ezra Miller is intoxicated. They are agitated. They are grabbing the microphone from a woman singing karaoke. They are yelling obscenities at other patrons. Bar staff asks them to calm down. They don't. Bar staff asks them to leave. They refuse. Police are called. When officers arrive, Miller becomes confrontational. They are arrested for disorderly conduct and harassment.
Bail is set at $500. They are released hours later. This is documented, official, a matter of public record. For the first time, the chaos has paperwork. But this is only the beginning. The next day, March 28th, Miller is arrested again. Same island, different incident. This time, they allegedly throw a chair at a 26-year-old woman, leaving her with a half-inch cut on her forehead. Second-degree assault charges are filed. A temporary restraining order is issued. Miller is ordered to stay away from the victim. Warner Brothers receives the news. So does the press. Headlines multiply. Ezra Miller arrested twice in Hawaii. Flash star in legal trouble. Warner Brothers faces crisis as lead actor arrested. But Miller doesn't leave Hawaii. They stay, and the incidents continue. In April, a couple files for a temporary restraining order, claiming Miller broke into their bedroom and threatened them. Police reports describe bizarre, threatening behavior. The documents are public. The pattern is undeniable. By late April, Miller has been the subject of 10 police calls in Hawaii, 10 separate incidents requiring law enforcement intervention. The charges include disorderly conduct, harassment, assault, burglary. Each incident is documented, each report is filed, each story makes headlines, and for Warner Brothers, each headline makes their $300 million investment harder to justify. Because this isn't speculation anymore. This isn't social media rumor. This isn't private concern expressed in whispered conversations. This is arrest records. This is restraining orders. This is law enforcement documentation that will never disappear from public databases. Media outlets don't need anonymous sources anymore. They have police reports. They have court documents. They have victims willing to speak on record. The story is no longer controllable. And yet, Warner Brothers stays silent. No public statement is released. No production pause is announced. No comment is provided to the press beyond vague references to ongoing legal matters. Because The Flash is already filmed. Post-production is underway. The release date is set for June 2023. Marketing materials have been produced. International distribution deals are signed. The studio is already hundreds of millions of dollars invested. Walking away now means writing off that entire investment. Delaying the film means disrupting the entire DC slate. Recasting is impossible. Miller is in every scene. The options are terrible. Release the film and face moral backlash for supporting an actor with multiple arrests, or shelve the film and absorb a financial loss that could destabilize the entire studio. So Warner Brothers chooses a third option. Wait. Hope the legal issues resolve. Hope Miller gets help. Hope the public forgets. Hope that by June 2023, 14 months from now, enough time will have passed that the Hawaii incidents feel like old news. It's a gamble, a desperate, expensive gamble, and it's about to get much, much worse, because the Hawaii incidents, as bad as they are only the beginning. The truly disturbing allegations haven't emerged yet. Those are still coming.
June 2022. A Massachusetts family files for a restraining order. They claim Ezra Miller has been housing their 18-year-old child, legally an adult but barely, on Miller's Vermont farm. The parents describe grooming behavior. They describe psychological manipulation. They describe a relationship that began when the individual was 12 years old. The allegations are devastating. The parents go public, speaking to media outlets, desperate to locate their child and remove them from Miller's influence. Miller's legal team responds, claiming the individual is a legal adult making their own choices. The family argues their child has been manipulated for years. The situation becomes a media firestorm. Then, in July, a different mother,
This one from North Dakota reports her 12-year-old child and their mother missing. She claims they were last seen with Ezra Miller. She files for an emergency protective order. The documents describe Miller providing alcohol and marijuana to the child. The allegations describe inappropriate behavior around a minor. Law enforcement begins investigating. The mother appears on news programs pleading for her child's safety. Each headline is more damaging than the last. Ezra Miller accused of grooming. Missing children allegedly with Flash actor. Parents seek protective orders against Miller. Warner Brothers can no longer remain silent. But they still don't make a public statement. Instead, behind closed doors, crisis meetings multiply. Legal teams convene. Insurance companies review policies. Executives calculate losses. The marketing campaign for The Flash is quietly paused. Press tour plans are shelved. Publicity appearances are canceled. The studio is in containment mode. But containment is impossible, because these aren't private matters anymore. These are criminal investigations. These are child welfare cases. These are protective orders issued by courts. In August 2022, Miller is charged with felony burglary in Vermont, accused of stealing bottles of alcohol from a private residence. Security footage allegedly shows Miller breaking and entering. Another arrest, another charge, another headline. At this point, Warner Brothers faces an impossible situation. The Flash is their most expensive DC film ever produced. It's intended to reset their entire cinematic universe. It features Michael Keaton's return as Batman, a massive marketing hook. It's scheduled for release in less than a year, and its star is facing multiple criminal charges, protective orders, and allegations involving minors. Every option is catastrophic. Release the film as planned, face protests, boycotts, and moral condemnation. Delay the film, disrupt the entire DC slate, and signal weakness to competitors. Shelve the film entirely, absorb a financial loss that could exceed $300 million. Recast and reshoot, technically impossible given the film's complexity. Warner Brothers is trapped, and Ezra Miller, despite everything, remains the only option they have. August 15th, 2022. Ezra Miller issues a public statement. It's carefully worded, clearly written by lawyers and publicists. Having recently gone through a time of intense crisis, I now understand that I am suffering complex mental health issues and have begun ongoing treatment. The statement reads, I want to apologize to everyone that I have alarmed and upset with my past behavior. I am committed to doing the necessary work to get back to a healthy, safe, and productive stage in my life. It's the first time Miller has publicly acknowledged anything. The statement is professional, apologetic, vague enough to avoid legal liability, specific enough to suggest accountability. But it changes nothing, because by August 2022, Hollywood has already made its decision. Ezra Miller is unhireable. Not through official blacklisting, that's not how the industry works, but through quiet consensus. Casting directors stop considering them. Agents stop submitting them for projects. Directors who once praised Miller's talent now decline to comment. The phones stop winning. The offers stop coming. The Flash press tour is restructured to minimize Miller's presence. International junkets are canceled. Red carpet appearances are limited. When the film finally premieres in June 2023, Miller attends but barely speaks. They appear for photo opportunities, then disappear. Co-stars do the heavy lifting in interviews, carefully deflecting questions about Miller's legal troubles. The film's marketing campaign focuses on Michael Keaton, on nostalgia, on spectacle. Ezra Miller, despite being the title character, is sidelined in promotion of their own film. And Warner Brothers never officially addresses the allegations, never releases a comprehensive statement, never explains their decision-making process. They simply release the film, absorb the financial loss when it underperforms, and move on. Because Hollywood doesn't exile people loudly, it doesn't hold press conferences announcing who's been blacklisted, it simply stops calling. And Ezra Miller's phone has gone silent. What happened to Ezra Miller? It's the question everyone asks, but nobody can definitively answer. Because we don't have access to Miller's medical records. We don't know their mental health history. We can't diagnose from a distance. But we can examine the systems that failed. Miller achieved fame at 18 years old, an age when most people are still forming their identity, still learning boundaries, still developing emotional regulation. They were immediately positioned as a symbol, a representative for queer youth, an icon of gender fluidity, a voice for outsiders. That's an enormous psychological burden for anyone, let alone a teenager. Fame doesn't just bring wealth and opportunity, it brings isolation, it distorts relationships. You never know who wants access to you versus access to your status. It removes normal consequences. Wealth can make legal problems disappear, can insulate you from accountability. It creates enablers, people whose livelihoods depend on you continuing to work, regardless of your well-being. Miller was surrounded by people invested in their productivity, not their health. Agents who earned commission, managers who took percentages, studios who needed content. Where were the interventions? Where were the mental health professionals? Where were the people willing to say, "Stop, this person needs help, not another contract"? They existed, surely, but they were overruled by financial interests. Because the machine demands content, the machine doesn't stop for mental health crises. The machine calculates risk versus reward and decides that risk is manageable until it suddenly isn't. And by the time it isn't, by the time the arrests multiply and the headlines spiral, the person at the center has already been failed by every system designed to protect them. This isn't an excuse for Miller's actions. Adults are responsible for their choices, but it is an indictment of an industry that treats people as products, then expresses shock when those products malfunction. The Flash was released on June 16, 2023. It opened to mixed reviews. It earned $108 million domestically, $268 million worldwide. Against a production budget of $220 million and likely another $100 million in marketing, it was a financial disaster. Warner Brothers lost money. The DC Universe reboot it was supposed to launch never materialized. The franchise Ezra Miller was supposed to anchor collapsed before it could begin. As of today, Miller's career is in limbo. No major projects are announced. No studio has publicly hired them. No filmmaker has defended them. The allegations from Hawaii remain legally unresolved in some cases. The families who sought protective orders haven't received public closure. The individuals who were allegedly groomed haven't told their full stories. And Warner Brothers has never been held accountable for their decisions, for choosing silence over intervention, for prioritizing financial investment over human well-being, for enabling behavior that escalated into alleged crimes. This is the legacy, not a great performance in a failed film, not a talented actor who lost their way, but a system that watched someone spiral in public over years and did nothing until it was too late. Because Hollywood has seen this before, it will see it again. The pattern repeats. Find young talent, apply immense pressure, profit from their work, ignore warning signs, express surprise when everything collapses, offer thoughts and prayers, move on to the next product. The questions remain. Could Ezra Miller have been helped earlier? Should Warner Brothers have halted production? Is rehabilitation possible? Is accountability separate from punishment? Where is the line between mental health crisis and criminal behavior? These are questions without easy answers, but they're questions worth asking, because Ezra Miller's story isn't unique, it's just unusually public. Hollywood builds myths quickly. It celebrates outsiders who challenge norms. It profits from brilliance and difference and volatility. And then, when that volatility becomes unmanageable, it destroys. Quietly, efficiently, without examination, without learning, and the cycle continues.